You're watching Newsfeed AM. Let's pick up on this conversation now. uMngeni Mayor Chris Pappas will contest the 2024 elections as a premier candidate for the Democratic Alliance in KwaZulu-Natal. The Democratic Alliance hoping that Pappas will give the party an edge in what some observers expect to be a hotly contested election. He joins me now in studio to tell us his plans ahead of the polls in 2024. Chris, it's good to have you here. Thank you very much. Good to see you in person. But let's begin the conversation with where you are right now, because perhaps that should be a launch pad for why KZN residents should trust and believe in your leadership skills in order to take that province to a higher level. So let's begin with why you think that you were the fit and proper candidate for the DA to put out there as the premier candidate. Because KZN, the DA in KZN, has a leader there, Francois Rogers. He could have easily been a premier candidate, but they've chosen you. Why you?
So thank you for having me. It's nice to see you in person, not on Zoom for a change. I was given an opportunity to lead my community, and that's the uMngeni Local Municipality, which is a microcosm of what KwaZulu-Natal looks like. A population that is majority black South Africans, a population that is largely rural with concentrated urban activity, high unemployment, a microcosm of what our province looked like. And by no means are we perfect. We've been in government for 22 months. We've still got a lot of work to do. Yeah. But I think that we've shown that if your priorities are right and you're trying to inject a new vigor into what government is supposed to be and don't try to reiterate the old ways of doing things, then you can actually make progress. And I think that's why the parties put their faith in me to say, well, you've been doing it there. Can we now replicate that on a provincial stage? Can we take the progress or the lessons learned from uMngeni and other DA-run governments across the country and replicate that in a province that has so many challenges, that is so dynamic, but also is, as the saying goes, alive with possibilities?
Yeah. We're going to talk about what the DA thinks it can replicate in the provincial level of government from where you are, which is a local sphere. But I think one of the big talking points on the back of your being announced as premier candidate of KZN, there was a lot of talk about your proficiency in isiZulu. Do you think that that is an added advantage for why the DA feels confident that they must field you ahead of the 2024 polls?
I don't think it's the only thing, but I do think that it does add an advantage. All my tests, all my exams, all my interviews are all in English. Yeah. And the panelists were all English speaking, or largely English speaking. So, yes, I think it does help, especially in a province which is only over 80% isiZulu speaking. I mean, it does, and it's rural folk. KZN is a rural province. But I've always said to people that more than speaking a language is the ability to understand the emotion behind language, the culture behind different words. And I use the word uhlonipha. Yeah. The direct translation is respect in English, but it has such a deeper meaning in isiZulu when you say uhlonipha. And when you can understand the meaning or the deeper emotion behind different words, I think it's easier to empathize with people. It's easier to relate to whatever circumstance it may be, a dream, a hope, a sadness, or despair. And then translate that into a program of action to try and either realize that dream or to fix a problem. So yes, I mean, I'm not naive. I think that communication is incredibly important. But I do think I also come with a youthful energy. Yeah. I come with a different perspective on politics. I come with less connection to a past, but more of a connection or a hope for the future of our province.
Talk to me about that connection, because at times we've seen you clad in ibheshu, that's your traditional Zulu attire. Where do you come from with this Zulu connection, and how it is? How is it, by the way, that you've learned to be so proficient in isiZulu?
So I grew up in the rural areas. When you've got more people to speak isiZulu to than English to, People often say, how did you learn the language? Well, I didn't learn to speak Zulu. I learned to read and write it. But, how did English people learn to speak English? But with language comes culture. You can learn it at school, and that's one thing. But to be immersed in someone's culture is something different. And I've grown up with Zulu people. So, and I learn. I learned a new word. Isilo came to visit us in our municipality, and I said, no, here's a cow, ingom. And someone said, no, don't call it that. It's iku. So I learned a new word. So like you're constantly learning in a language and in a culture.
Why would a cow be referred to as iku as opposed to inkomo? Because we know it as inkomo from where I come from, which is the Eastern Cape and it's closer. It's called inkomo. Inkomo, it's a cow.
When you make an offering, especially to someone who is senior, someone
Right.
who is royal but highly royal, then you don't refer to it as that. It becomes something different. Not silly things, but things that you don't know why people carry iwisa. And I was explaining to a friend the other day that if you don't carry your iwisa, which is your knob carry, what kind of a man are you? If a snake crosses your path, what are you going to do? So there's all these nuances that I find so beautiful about South African culture in general that we need to share with each other. And I take pride and I love learning about things like that.
22 months into government, as you've just said, in uMngeni, but already some people suggesting that you have managed to improve the situation of that municipality. I'd like you to take us into your confidence about what you think your real successes have been in that municipality.
So like I said, 22 months to turn around 28 years is, there's still challenges. We're not immune to the challenges of unemployment and things like that. But I think what we have managed to do is firstly change the internal culture of the municipality. So like any business or like any big organization, the culture internally then translates into what you see on the ground. So we've really put a lot of time and effort into reshaping what the staff of the municipality believe, feel, think about the institution. They're probably sick of me saying it, but every meeting I will say, this is not Chris Pappas' municipality, it's not the DA's municipality. This municipality belongs to the people of uMngeni. It is a public institution, and we must deliver for the public. And that is what we are there to do. So internal culture is incredibly important. Capacity.
Wait, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you talk about building an internal culture, what culture did you find within the municipality? Because that is what people often respond to, and perhaps it might explain your popularity there right now.
So I think there was a lack of accountability,
right?
A lack of ability for people to express new ideas. So a lot of young officials, particularly, who had great ideas to solve things but were never given the opportunity. A lot of lower and middle-level managers who, because they weren't politically aligned, were never given a space to try and achieve things or to implement the roles for which they studied. Performance management, so again, back to accountability. When you don't manage performance, vision and direction, if people don't know why they are coming to work, I must drive my staff crazy sometimes, but I'll walk into people's offices and I'll say, what's the vision? What's the vision of the municipality? Right. And people have largely started to rattle off 3/4 of the vision of the municipality. But why do you come to work every day? Yeah. If you don't know what we're aiming to achieve? So it's things like that that we've really tried to work hard on. And yes, I'm sure. It is frustrating at times because you get pushback and you get change management is difficult. If it wasn't difficult, then it would happen overnight and be easy.
So let me in on this. In some of the municipalities where a new government has come in after a long time, and I think one of those clear examples is Twane, the capital. There's a DA mayor there who's running that municipality in a coalition government, and I sense that there's a big fight between what he says he's trying to turn around, and that includes the administrative arm of the municipality. Leave aside the political office for a moment. The administrators, because these are people who are supposed to be apolitical, and they're supposed to drive services to the people. Did you find difficulty with that kind of thinking in the municipality? Just now you spoke about people who were not given a chance to express themselves, possibly because of political leanings that may not have been aligned. I'm complicating what should be a simple question, and all I'm trying to drive at is, as part of the culture that you found in that municipality, was there resistance simply because there has been a particular political party that ran that municipality for a very long time, and now you are the new kid on the block and you're supposed to, or you're trying to instill a new ethos?
Yes and no. I think Cilliers has got an incredibly difficult job. He's got like over 20,000, probably 30,000 employees with agencies and entities, and I really do feel sorry for him. But for us, it's not even a smaller version of that. It's a less complicated version of that. There are less stakeholders, less networks, less money involved, and less at stake. I mean, our municipality, if you look at what it contributes to the ANC's vote in the province, it's 14,000 votes compared to the millions that they get. So it's relatively small. Compared to Twane, it's more. But to answer your question, yes, there are individuals within, some of them are still there, within the system who deliberately frustrate you, and that can manifest in different ways, whether it's in human resources capacity to make sure that you're unable to get qualified and experienced people into positions, whether it is in supply chain positions where you can't get new contracts through, so old contracts get perpetually updated and you can't cancel them because you need the service. And then just being slow. You know, when you have a problem and you've now come up with a solution, researched, quantified, and you say, now let's implement the solution. And then slow. There's always an excuse. There's always a problem. There's always this is the issue. So you find that deliberately frustrating the system. That's not whole scale. But when it does affect crucial things, then it can destabilize not just government, but the program of action to rebuild.
We're going to take a break, and when we return, we'll pick up on still some of what people suggest are the successes in uMngeni, and I want to use that, therefore, as a launch pad, so to speak, into what you think you can do at provincial government. If you're just tuning in, don't go anywhere. We'll take a break and return with Chris Pappas. You're watching Newsfeed AM. If you're just joining us, you find us slap bang in the middle of a conversation with the Democratic Alliance's premier candidate for KwaZulu-Natal, Chris Pappas, who also doubles up as, right now, the mayor of uMngeni, one of the municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal. The element I want to touch on, Chris, is one that is known to almost every South African, and that is that municipalities are struggling financially. I've read up, as part of the research for this interview, that you've managed to make some changes within the 22 months that you've been in office, and that is to pay off some loans. How is that going to help with the financial situation of that municipality, and why is it important?
So yes, we paid off 12 million rands worth of loans, which in the, for big metros, that's, I don't know, it's probably one day's worth of expenditure on their water bill. But for someone like us, it's massive. How does it help? Well, firstly, we're saving the taxpayers in our municipality over 450,000 rand a year in interest. So that's money that could go to other service delivery issues. But our loans were taken to pay operational costs, which were ESCOM and salaries, which both of those, if you don't, I mean, those are not good things to take loans for. Good loans are loans for infrastructure and service delivery related things. So what it does do is, number one, it brings back some sort of financial confidence into the municipality by external financial service providers. So we can now go out and get a loan for a new bridge or a new road or whatever it might be, which is good. Loans aren't necessarily bad things if they're taken for the right reasons. But it also then frees up space within our budget for us to be able to spend on other things. Monthly payments to loans, we can now shift that to service delivery. But what it also does is that it gives the public confidence that we are managing their finances correctly. So people pay their taxes to us, and if those taxes are not coming in, then we can't deliver services. So it's this vicious cycle that can take place. So we're trying to manage the finances well, and it's also what the Auditor General said, as we went from qualified to unqualified in a couple of months by doing what the Auditor General had asked us to do in terms of trying to clean up some of the issues within our books. So, and that instills confidence. When people can see that the government is trying to fix things, then they have renewed confidence to donate when there is a disaster, or to support a community that might not be their own, because they can see that things are working, and there's no longer this animosity and anger that constantly exists. So yeah, it really has helped us.
Now that we're talking finances, something that I want to rattle you up a bit. Is it a tale? Because you will probably be one of the people to tell us here. Is it a tale that municipal officials are likely more paid or better paid than provincial officials? And if so, explain that to us, why it is, and are you overpaying some of your officials, by the way?
So to answer your second question first, yes, we are overpaying some of our municipal officials. Why? It's because it's regulated not at a local level but at a national level through collective bargaining. Where your collective bargaining council is a political forum as opposed to one that champions the interests of government and service delivery, then you have that. And I think that's what people are facing now in Twane. To answer your first question, I think what many people don't understand is that there are five different grades of government, grade 1 to 5, and different grades of government pay people different amounts. It's legislated how much we pay. So I recently lost one of our senior employees that we got into our audit department because the city of eThekwini could offer him 500,000 Rand more a month. I mean, not a month, a year. So how do I attract skilled and qualified individuals at a small rural municipality when secondary metros and the private sector can offer more? Now, there's a huge imbalance. For a very long time, you've had municipal managers and directors, and I'm not speaking about metros because it's a completely different ballgame, where municipal managers and directors or general managers have not received increases comparatively to those below them. So you have you have middle management earning more than their seniors. Now, you can imagine what that does in any organization for morale, for productivity, etc. And that's not being addressed at Salga. It's not being addressed at the bargaining councils. So
it's left to you.
It's
who's running the municipality.
It's left to us to manage. And there's a very big danger of moving away and creating a sort of a different set of rules to what the collective bargaining council has agreed to. So in one sense, the bargaining council is it's a thorn in our side, but in the other sense that it protects us. And if you go back to your Twane example, that's a huge issue for them now as well, to deviate from things that were agreed to at a bargaining council. We have municipal officials who are way overpaid, but we also have municipal officials who are underpaid. I think that local government should be given more power to decide what their staff looks like. I would love to be able to say, I don't know, find a CA. Or to find, with all due respect to local government officials, you're not going to get the cream of the crop lawyer who would, in the private sector to come down to a grade 5 municipality. And that's just, if you're going to accept a higher package, you will do that. I mean, that's the law of economics. And that's the problem that we face. We have this high turnover. My CFO started and resigned one day later because she was offered a position as group CFO in one of the major banks. So you can't blame her for that. At 37 years old, go for it. Go and do that. But it leaves this huge, huge gap in government. Now you could imagine if you add somewhere like Inrutu or somewhere rural in KZN. You're a highly qualified, highly skilled individual. Most people are looking for a more urban, cosmopolitan lifestyle as opposed to no water, no electricity, no roads, no shops, no cell phone signal, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Now, how do you build capacity in local government, especially rural areas, when this is the challenge that we confront? And one day we must have a discussion about what municipalities look like, the boundaries, and how, if they're actually financially viable.
Yeah.
How do you take a municipality where 4% of the people are actually able to pay taxes? And now I'm not talking about people who choose not to. I'm talking who are actually able to pay taxes because of poverty, unemployment, access to wealth, all of those sorts of things. And then you expect a municipality to deliver for 100% of the people.
You run a largely rural municipality. You've just used the word poverty. The manner in which you have tried to tighten finances within the municipality. You've mentioned paying off loans, which then frees up that interest that you would ordinarily pay, possibly at a very high fee. You're now able to do things that you ordinarily would have been unable to do. I'm trying to get to a question about whether that financial management has accrued or is trickled down to those who are poor and unable to manage. Is that benefiting them? Because that is who, at the end of the day, is going to put you or the party that you serve under back into the municipality.
Yeah, so in 30 seconds, let me give you what else we've done, so it gives you a package of sort of the financial interventions. So instead of building, hundreds of community halls that don't actually have roads going to them and don't have electricity and water, but just to say that we, as a politician, I've cut a ribbon, we redirected funding to buy plant and equipment. Because that same plant and equipment cuts down on hiring charges, because some comrade is getting a contract to hire his TLB or his whatever it might be. I've now got my own equipment. Yes, I still hire, but I do it far less. So I've saved money here, and I've also capacitated the municipality with plant and equipment, TLBs, etc. So that's one thing. Then, as they say, the devil is in the detail. So something small, and it's something that we're working on at the moment. Our insurance for the municipality had expired and was on 6-month extensions. But what that does, it increases your premium. So insurance companies are going to say, well, I've only got you for 6 months, so I'm going to increase your premium to cover any losses or liabilities that I might have. So you find yourself in a situation where you have a 15-year-old tractor, but you're paying 6,000 or 7,000 rand a month insurance on it. So the devil is in the detail. So by tackling issues like that, you bring it down to a normal amount, and cumulatively, instead of paying a 6 million rand insurance bill every year, you pay a 3 million rand insurance bill a year. So all of these cumulative things help to create money within your budget. Yeah. Being stringent on what you spend. If a contractor has repaired the same leak 3 times in a row, get rid of the contractor. They haven't done it right the first place, the first time. If a municipal official has paid Eskom a day late, and that is accrued interest, recuperate that money from the municipal official who's paid it late, even if it's 1,000 rand. All of it adds up. So we've been able to do that, and then to answer your question, what that means is now, I can tend to gravel roads, I can clean up illegal dumping, I can do all these things, and it is largely in poor communities. I can do those things because I have the ability financially and in terms of capacity to do so. I can employ more staff because we're top heavy at the moment. There's always too many managers in government and never enough people on the ground. But it's those sorts of things that are important. And there's still a long way to go. Yeah. But if we continue to do that, something silly, Oli, something so silly, stationery. So when you look at the municipal budget, I see stationery increases every year by whatever the budget's 4.5%, straight line budgeting. So he says, surely there's only so many staplers that you can buy. You've got a stapler that can last 2 years, you're good. But you see your stationery budget go from 200,000 rand to 400 to 600, and it's spent. And furniture, millions spent on furniture. And you go into an office and we're not a, I suppose I can't use brands here, I'll end up shooting myself in the foot. We're not a Ferrari, let me say that, because we're not a Ferrari municipality. So don't go and buy the most expensive trucks and the most expensive whatever. We'll get there. We'll become a Ferrari municipality. But build capacity. And do so as transparently and as objectively as possible.
using that very philosophy of a Ferrari municipality that you are not, but that's what you aspire to be. You are now being pushed to a higher level, provincial government. What is it that you think is wrong with KZN? We'll talk about your priorities, because I'm aware of them. Corruption and crime. You're saying that those are possibly one of your most urgent priorities. But at the moment, as you campaign, what is it that you think is wrong with KZN in its entirety, and how can it be fixed?
So what's wrong is that we have the ANC in government. That's what's wrong. Plain and simple. I mean, if you want a simple answer. But
that's politicking.
Well,
101.
I'm not a politician. So we have far too many people in positions of influence and power. I'm not talking just politicians, who have control over large amounts of resources that are required for critical services: health, education, roads, social development, things like that, environment, who are either unskilled, unqualified, or have an ulterior agenda. Now I'm putting a huge target on my back, but so be it. But we cannot have that. We cannot have people in positions where they're supposed to be delivering and they are not, and there's no consequences for that. That's the first thing. Secondly is that the system of patronage and exploitation of state resources for either individual benefit or party political benefit has become so entrenched that it's become normalized. And we are hemorrhaging funds because of that. So those things are the unseens, the things that you and me drive on the roads. We see the potholes, we see those sorts of things. So a complete overhaul of what government looks like and what government sounds like, what it feels like, what it does, what its priorities are, has to happen. We spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of rands on silly things like catering and events that don't lead to positive benefits to the people on the ground, to the people that you were talking about earlier. So that needs to be the priority, a complete restructuring of how our government delivers and what it is delivering.
Very quickly, we're running out of time. Crime and corruption.
And unemployment.
Including unemployment. It's a big one because it is potentially the driver. In fact, I shouldn't be so guarded around it because poverty breeds the social ills that we see that come with crime. How do you deal with that, do you think?
So, I mean, each one of those is a show in themselves. Let's deal with unemployment. Are you happy with that? So, there are so many opportunities in our province, and there are so many quick wins. Tourism, as an example. If you can't get to 3/4 of our province because the roads are not looked after, the signs don't point to the place that is trying to be developed, then how do you expect tourism to flourish? Basic things like that. So tourism, there's incredible potential around tourism. The Port of Durban and the Port of Richards Bay are highly inefficient. You see the trucks lining up on the highway, you see them destroying Durban. So if we're not protecting our rails, if we're not looking after our ports in conjunction with national government and local municipalities, how do we get our economy and the engine room moving? If we are not, as a provincial government, actively tackling load shedding, like you see in the Western Cape, if we're not dedicating money towards trying to solve load shedding, which has been opened up to us, that opportunity is open to us by the national government through legal changes, but you don't find an active pursuit of trying to change that. So there are so many levers within at a provincial level to drive economic growth. And with that economic growth, and it needs to be job-intensive economic growth, usually infrastructure-led, which is a quick win in our province, you can bring the dignity that people need. You can keep people off of Wunga, and we invented a whole name. We call people paras. We invented a name for our discarded children instead of trying to solve the problem. So if you can do that, you can start to solve that. If people can then afford rent, you no longer have so many informal settlements. If you decrease crime because people are no longer so desperate, people can go to better schools and improve their outlook on life or their abilities for social mobility. So without meaningful job creation, I'm not talking about the 350 that people get. I'm talking about meaningful job creation. then we're stuck.
Chris, you're a politician, and there was always going to be a hard part to this interview. I'm not saying that the stuff that we've spoken about has not been hard. You've managed to endear yourself to the residents of uMngeni. You are now going to go into a level up in government. That's if indeed the Democratic Alliance does do well and you get into provincial government. But on your way there, there are things that the Democratic Alliance has done to not endear themselves or to not endear the party to some of your targets, and I dare say, to the black voter. So, there were posters, July 2021, in a part of Durban, or KZN, and it was in communities where the Indian residents specifically profiled black residents from moving around that area, because it was assumed that every black person would have possibly been up to no good. And so posters came. The ANC called you racists. We, the Democratic Alliance, call you our heroes. Was that a mistake in hindsight?
I don't think that you can convey a message as complicated as... I mean, firstly, the riots themselves were highly complicated, and the social unrest that came from that and the ramification for our province are highly complicated. But I don't think it was wise to try and convince or convey a complex message like that on a poster. I think for people who stood up around the province, to defend their shopping centre or their church or their mall or whatever it might be, and you hear the stories of taxi drivers and farmers standing together to defend, their towns. I think that is a tale of heroism. But I don't think that in a context that is so complex that you can convince people through a poster that, without getting people confused or riling up emotional or racial or whatever it might be. It could have been a different context. So, yeah, it was a very complex time for our province. I don't think that you can convey a message as complicated that on a poster. Were people who stood up for their communities across the province heroes? Well, in the face of no police, in the face of no SANDVS, yes, people were heroes. But in the context of that particular situation, I don't think that the message was conveyed as it was supposed to.
And I ask you this question because recently, I think recently is yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, there's a poster, a graphic, if you like, of the mayor of Twane, Brink, who almost stands towering over these people who are protesting. And it's put people off. It's almost similar to what we have just discussed, those posters, in one of the communities in KZN. Where I'm going with this line of questioning is, how does the DA normalize black people voting for you without ticking them off by these silly little things that get done, perhaps at a level much higher than where you are? But that's where you are headed, and so you are going to have to offer an opinion when you are asked on a platform such as this one. How do you not make those mistakes as a Democratic Alliance as you try to normalize black people voting for your party?
So I think you're very right in saying that it has to be normalized. All right? What normalized means, we can have a debate about that. But I think as a younger, more in tune, more tone-correct generation of politicians come through, across all political parties, actually. But we're speaking about the DA. As we come through, people like myself, like Jordan, like Saviwe, like Tyron, who was the mayor of Mogale, many of us, we have to make sure that our voices as young people, as a new generation of politicians, are equally as heard. And I think it's a debate in politics in general and the world over, is that how do you balance a new generation of politicians who see the world differently with perhaps the older generation of politicians who have an equally as important worldview, but it needs to be balanced against what we want to see in the future. So we have to be louder about it. We have to be louder about, and I'm saying us, young politicians, about what is wrong, what is right, and how we get that message across. I think what is important for me, Koli, is, you know, I in my speech, when was it, yesterday? Yesterday? Feels like I'm all over Gauteng already. Is that I'm a product of not my identity. I'm here regardless of my identity. Age, race, gender, rural background, sexuality. What I'm a product of is the political freedom that we've won in our country. Yeah. What that has to translate to is opportunities, fairness, redress. And it's my job to say, well, I was given political freedom. How do I achieve, using my voice, using my position, using my privilege, to be able to transform our society into the direction that we're going without polarizing it even further?
Take us into your confidence. We have 1.5 minutes. The IFP-DA Pact in KZN. You are going to be one of the central figures, if indeed you do well. What draws you together? What is this pact between the two political parties?
So I think there's a realization that our province really is not going in the right direction. I mean, our country isn't, but we're speaking about KZN. And there's a common denominator in this, and that is the party that is currently running the provincial government. And, you know, there comes a time in politics where influential political parties, influential political leaders have to sit around at the same table and say, what is in the best interest of the people? And that is what we've done as the DA and the IFP in KZN. We started at a municipal level, where we say, listen, we are individual and independent organizations, and we must hold each other accountable. But we can do so in a constructive way that leads to progress, rather than this constant bickering that we see prevalent in South African politics. So the future is coalitions in South Africa. I don't think anyone's going to argue against that. And in KZN, no one's going to get 50%. My job is to make sure that the Democratic Alliance has the biggest share of the vote, so that when we do go into a coalition with the IFP and maybe one or two other political parties, that we can be drivers of a stable change as opposed to what we've seen in other places.
Babu Pappas, thank you very much, Chris Pappas. And that's my time between you and I on this Wednesday. Hope you had some thought into this conversation, and I hope you take something away from it. Chris Pappas, we wish you all the best going into the future. You are an inspiration. At just 32 years old, you're being propelled to a much higher level. Congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.